Now, I'm gonna get this out of the way before anything else. Ghostbusters 2016 was a very bad movie that was unfunny, irritating, and disrespectful to the original, and that's all I have got to say on it. The movie has been talked to death, and I'm not gonna be a part of the hate crusade.
End of story. Bye-bye.
So, with that out of the way, Ghostbusters Afterlife is an okay movie that's funny, delightful, and respects the original in a satisfying way, though not without flaws. I legitimately was not expecting this film to be as good as it was. I mostly expected it to be minimal improvement over 2016, but instead it exceeded my expectations, with some good characters, decent jokes, and a good story, even if it is a little too similar to the original in more ways than one. And even though I was going into this film not expecting it to do much, I did have a couple things I was hoping the film would do, since it's supposed to be a continuation of the original film. Like, firstly, the action is very minimal, with it only having probably around 2 to 3 sets at best, which I thought was a smart move, since the first film was never really an action flick, and it prioritized comedy and characters above all else, which this film does, while also putting an emotional element to it, where the family is struggling and everyone is trying to figure out who they are. It has hints of a coming-of-age story at times. The characters are likable, with the standouts for me being Phoebe, who comes off as a kid version of Egon, of course, being the smart but socially awkward kid, but with her sense of dark and lame humor, which was pretty fun with some good moments. Podcast I thought was going to be an irritating, internet-obsessed child, but he was actually fun and not that, thank God, and instead provided some levity from situations that the characters get themselves into at points. Paul Rudd was a joy to watch, with a fun personality and actually being a nice person throughout the film, though I do wish there was a little bit more to him, since he's pretty much sidelined at around the halfway mark of the second act, and all the other characters are fine, but they do some stuff with Egon that I kind of enjoyed, but then some other stuff I didn't, but I'll get more into that later on. The comedy was okay, with around 75% of it landing, but not being absolutely dreadful, though I would have wished that there was a little bit more comedy like the original, where it was more dry and sarcastic, but that's just me and I like that kind of humor. Everyone's got their own tastes. I really enjoy how this film was taking its time with everything, and didn't rush to do things. Although it was slow, I think it benefited the film. This also helped play into the film's acknowledgement of the original movie and how it doesn't make everything just a total joke. I mean, the first time we're about to see the Ecto-1, it cuts away, subverting the expectation of seeing it there. And hell, the only times we see the proton packs are in a test scene, the car chase, and the ending. And that's it. So it was nice that they didn't go overboard with showing those things 24/7 on screen. It was nice. But now I have to discuss the multitude of issues this film has. Like, when coming out of the theater, I didn't really see any issues with it, but once I thought about it, it started to all come to me slowly. Oh, and this is where there's going to be huge spoilers for the film, so just before I go on my little tangent about that, you've been warned. So, with some of the issues I have, for example, one of them being the horror of the film, since it's dealing with ghosts and stuff, but instead of it trying to play up the tension and the build-up to whatever's going on, it instead goes for jump scares with obnoxious loud banging noises. And it's especially irritating when you're in a theater with surround sound. Like, I'm sorry, but that's just a cheap scare and that doesn't actually feel legitimately earned. Also, I wasn't a big fan of them doing the first film all over again, really. Like from the Devil Dogs all the way to Gozer, which felt a little much at times, since we've already seen that stuff exactly and done better in the first film. Additionally, the references were a little too much in certain areas, where it was just a little dumb. Like, did we really need to see the crunch bar Venkman gave to Egon in that one scene? Or the, "Are you a god?" moment? I mean, shit, when lines like, "Who you gonna call?" are used seriously and not made out to be silly, it comes off as really awkward and a little cringy. Oh, and good lord, that third act was a little much. It started to devolve into a CGI nightmare and absolutely went against what I believe the rest of the film was, where it took its time and was mostly quiet and subtle. This is perfectly exemplified when the original cast was brought out in their costumes, and although it's played for laughs, with a couple of them actually being pretty funny, it makes you question everything from where they got their jumpsuits and the proton packs, or hell, how they got out to the middle of nowhere so quickly. I mean, the stakes were somewhat low too, since there wasn't really any people in the town, and when the ghost apocalypse started, we didn't see any of it. We got to see little clips of ghosts flying by, and like that one little clip with a miner in like a diner or something like that, but that's it. For most of the movie, the entire town is just empty. For maybe a couple places and the diner that there is, and that's it. There wasn't anything there. So with that, they should have taken out something like the God forbidden Walmart scene, which did nothing except have product placement and try to give us another cutified version of something that we like. They should have done something else and give more time to character development or showing more of the town to help us relate to the characters more and do stuff with it. Which, speaking of characters, they have good chemistry with each other, but some just do not get enough development, like Trevor, who basically just does certain things just because, like repairing the Ecto-1 without any reason or knowledge of him knowing how to repair cars. And he comes off as a dick a lot of the times to people around him, which just makes him kind of irritating at points. His love interest Lucky as well was massively underutilized, basically just showing up for a couple scenes that you'd see her, having no knowledge of how to do any of the technology and somehow being able to use proton packs and stuff, and just basically showing up at the finale as if she was there the whole time. And as I mentioned before, neither Paul Rudd or Carrie Coon's characters were given enough screen time to have good development to their characters besides surface level stuff. They were just kind of there, maybe had a couple personalities, that was it. And I get that someone like Podcast doesn't get development, but I'm alright with that since he's basically comedic relief, and it works for his character. So with that, everyone else just feels kind of hollow at points with nothing much to them besides Phoebe perhaps, because at least she gets some development and we understand what she's trying to do throughout the film, and she's distinct compared to everyone else at least. But the biggest issue involving characters to me is how Egon is treated in this film. And yes, I know the ending of this film was touching and sweet, and I agree with that, though I'm debating if I'm okay with CGI Harold Ramis, or if they should have just stuck to not showing him, but Jesus, that facial CGI is on another level now. Anyways, even though there was a sweet ending, the film is built on the shoddy foundation that you'd have to believe Egon would abandon his friends and family, leaving nothing to them, basically acting out of character or going way overboard in his socially awkward scientist part of him. Like, his daughter has every right to think he's an asshole, and I'm sorry, but just because he was following his daughter's life when not being there and has a wall of photos of her, that's not very good when you realize that her life kind of went to shit after he left and never came back to help or even talk to her at all. And you're supposed to believe that none of the other guys would have believed him talking about the end of the world and the return of Gozer. Like, they stopped that from happening in the original film. And I'm supposed to believe Ray, of all of them, would not believe Egon, the other scientist who went along the most with the ghost-busting stuff? Really? Anyways, after looking back at the film and realizing the major flaws of it, like retreading familiar ground that we've already seen, not enough character development, and dragging Egon's character through the dirt just to get the story started, I'm giving Ghostbusters Afterlife a 6 out of 10. Although this is better than Ghostbusters 2016 in every aspect tenfold, it still has flaws that hurt the overall experience. But the good stuff here is very good, and that's what keeps it from being just an average film. And if Sony has to milk the film, which they will, then I don't think that it's a terrible starting off point for a new franchise. But without looking at it like that, I do think that this was the film that the fans deserved and needed to wash that bad taste out of their mouths.
The power of penny compels you!
Hopefully this will be looked at better in the future, or if there are sequels to come, they will improve off of what has been laid down here.